China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what you hear are Chinese war drums as the theme for China Watch Radio. And kind of appropriate today, given the news that we were going to lay on the table for you. This is China Watch Radio, and today we have on the boards, we have Susan Simon running things. Here we have Bill Graff in the studio.
Hello, sir.
And then we have... Jaunty's up there in the woods someplace. Hello, Jaunty.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. And we have David Welsh here. Hello, David. David.
Hey, good afternoon.
All right. So, and Michael Olson, yours truly. So, today we have several pieces of news to put on the table for you. And we're going to start it off. And in the second half hour here, we're going to take a quick look at a get-together that China and the United States had in Singapore.
I love that term, get-together, yeah.
Well, it lasted a half hour. My goodness.
I think you hardly get past the greetings in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like waving at each other. See you later.
Yeah. So it's going to be pretty interesting. So stay tuned for that section of our show this hour. So right now we're going to start it off with Jaunty, who's going to tell us about the movies. And the movie being Top Gun, and the significance of that movie in our conversation about China. Jaunty, take it away.
Well, now everybody has seen the movie Top Gun Maverick, except me, apparently. It's not for a lack of trying. I just haven't had the opportunity. And by all accounts, it's a classic blockbuster. I think it grossed something like $300 million in the first weekend. So extremely popular movie, except it's not popular in China, where it's been banned. And the reason, one of the main reasons it's been banned, now there's more than one, but one of the main flashpoints, and something that folks were aware of, let's say, our cadre of China watchers were aware of this some time ago, is that in early trailers of the movie, Tom Cruise's character Maverick's famous flight jacket had the flag of Taiwan on it in the original movie from the 80s, and that flag of Taiwan was removed and replaced by some sort of non sequitur image that didn't really represent anything, hoping that no one would notice. Now, when the film was originally being kind of, when the foundations were being laid for the original making of the movie, Tencent, the very large Chinese media firm, was one of the financiers as late as 2019. Now, if you want to get a blockbuster movie into the Chinese market, as we've discussed in the past, you have to do a couple of things. They only let in about 30 or 40 international films every year, so there's already a limit on how much outside influence they'll allow into their market. And then you have to not do anything that upsets anyone. Of course, being as vague as possible, so that everyone tries to self-censor themselves in order to gain access to the Chinese market of 1.4 billion people. So originally, this was a movie that was going to be created in such a way as to appease the censors and have that opportunity for entrance into the Chinese market. Now, Tencent pulled out, and given the atmosphere in general, the concept of a pro-U.S. military movie being allowed to be one of those 30 or 40 foreign films let into China became increasingly unlikely. Now, Chinese censorship had worked pretty well in the past in this regards of companies like United Airlines, Delta, Marriott, American Express, Goldman Sachs. They'd all done things with regards to Taiwan, the way that they described Taiwan to make sure that they didn't upset anybody. But not so with this movie. Now, according to Chris Fenton, who's the former president of DMG Entertainment and the author of the book Feeding the Dragon: Inside the $1 Trillion Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business, this is a quote from him. The global goodwill generated by reinstating the flags easily outweighs any potential revenues from China. It seems like he's leaning on the side of saying that putting the Taiwanese flag back in the current film was a coup for not just for the movie, but in terms of Hollywood's general behavior vis-a-vis China. So perhaps on the bright side, we're sort of seeing a return to more traditional norms where Hollywood movies are able to succeed without doing all of the necessary acts and behaviors in order to be allowed into the Chinese market. At the same time, another thing is happening, which is that all of China's biggest blockbuster films at the moment are movies like Wolf Warrior or the Battle at Lake Changjin, which are extremely militaristic movies. They're basically Chinese versions of Rambo. And so while we're all cheering on the U.S. Air Force here, the Chinese are cheering on the Chinese soldiers who are fighting the Americans in the Korean War. Just something I want to add to provide a bit of perspective. Now, I actually was recommended this story by our friends at thebeltonnews.com. They do a great job of covering China. I consider them fellow China watchers. And one of the concepts that they suggested to me was the question: how many movies have we seen in the last 20 years that have a anti-China perspective, or even just a perspective critical of China? I shouldn't say anti-China because that's a form of prejudice, but are our contemporary films allowed to be critical of China? And perhaps we're seeing a change in the weather with this particular film.
Well, it certainly does represent a change. It certainly does represent the fact that somebody's standing up and saying, take this. So who did that? Who was responsible for making that decision?
It was, I believe it was made at fairly high levels within the studio.
Well, it had to be.
I was about to say, I believe it's whoever has the money is making the decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't sort of none of this is kind of official. There wasn't some kind of, we've decided to do this statement from the studios or anything like that.
But they did.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Now, in the first Top Gun movie, the bad guys, the guys who Maverick, got famous shooting down, were the Russians, the USSR, right? Mm-hmm. So who are the bad guys in the new Top Gun?
Good question. I haven't seen it yet. David,
have we seen the airplanes?
No, not yet. I've been out, so I've been waiting to go back to the theater. I'd love to see that. Maybe it's on my list. Yeah. You know what might be worth thinking about for a second is why did they have the flag on their back in the first place? And if you go back to the Second World War with Claire Lee Chennault, the general who had the American Expedition Force in China, they were fighting the Japanese, and they had the Chinese Republic flag on their back, which is now currently the Taiwan flag. And it was called a blood chit. There was a little explanation below the flag in Chinese that said, if you find this pilot downed, rescue him and bring him back over here to the Americans or to the Chinese army, and there's a reward for you. And so there was a heritage in wearing this for a long time that has kind of carried forward just through tradition.
Wow.
But now politics
Billy.
have changed.
Yes.
Oh, so that actually dates back to the American support for the Chinese military. At the time, it was the Chinese nationalist military during the Second World War. There was actually a volunteer air force that went over there where they're flying the flying tigers,
The P-40s,
right?
Yeah, P-40
Yeah,
flying
yeah.
tigers with the shark teeth on them.
And,
Yes.
and you notice back in the day, Jonty, that all of those airplanes, not only did they called them the Flying Tigers, but they also had, paintings on the nose of the airplanes identifying them, particular crews and whatnot.
Well, interesting piece of trivia is that they would actually repaint those planes. They'd fly multiple sorties a day, and it would keep adding paint to the planes or taking paint off, and it confused the Japanese. They thought there were much bigger squadrons. They had 60 planes, and the Japanese thought there were 300 or 400 planes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, David, because you've been running around the Far East a lot more recently than I have. But when I was out there running around and taking in a movie here and there, the movies were all very militaristic. And I was wondering if they're the same now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. With Chinese nationalism, you're seeing much more kind of pro-CCP strong characters who push back against the evil West. I think I reported earlier I had seen plays, theater plays in China when I was there that actually put this out on stage. The evil Westerner coming to rape the virtue of China and the CCP coming in to rescue these symbols of the state.
Right. That's almost like the early Red Guard theaters,
Yes.
Sure.
The last two movies I saw that featured China were the one where the girl is fighting through the bamboo. I forget the name of this movie, but it was symbolic. She's fighting the bad guys while on tops of bamboo in the wind.
Yes.
You know what I'm
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
There you go. Yeah. And the other one was the newest version of Karate Kid, starring Jaden Smith, and I think Jackie Chan, if I remember right. Of course.
Do you remember the movie, the Mars movie, where they were, we had to go and rescue our astronauts?
Right.
Yeah. Remember in that movie, they actually had a Chinese rocket that went and rescued the Americans to give them the boost.
That's right.
It was a way to get
the way. That's
China.
And guess what? China saved the day, basically.
Yes.
Quietly saved our bacon.
Yeah.
And now we're to the point where we can't make movies together?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, now, did any of you see the comedy on Netflix called Space Force?
Oh, yes.
Did not.
No, I have not. I have to check that out.
That's it. You'll actually get a kick out of it. It ends up being this kind of portrayal of this incompetent U.S. Space Force that ends up on the moon, and they get in some kind of a schoolyard spat with the Chinese astronauts who are trying to build a moon base as well, and they decide to go and do the equivalent of toilet paper their base. Only while they're doing that, the Chinese are heading the other direction to do the same to the U.S. base. It's actually quite funny.
Well, I had a friend of mine in the Air Force who had a bunch of patches were made up, and there was these guys in spacesuits, and it was space shuttle door gunner, and they had a guy with a gun out the side of a space shuttle.
Well, it's interesting to note that how popular culture and the manifestations of culture are really signaling the relationship between China and the United States, as we have seemed to make a change here recently, a relatively big one. For throughout the Deng Xiaoping era, we were working really closely. It seems like the United States was bending over backwards to give China just everything we had to give, and they took it. And now it's a little bit different. Speaking of which, Billy has a story about the Hermit Kingdom.
We have this image of China. At least those of us who have a few gray hairs have this image of China, at least in the back of my brain. It's almost like Taiwan, except all of China. That's kind of the way I was brought up to think about both Chinas. But it turns out that the larger China, the communist China, has some really interesting. I guess the best way to put it is that they have some very interesting ideas about how to conduct themselves in various situations. And what I'm talking about is, of course, COVID-19. Now, we sort of had a little of that here where we were kind of locked down. A lot of us didn't want to go to the stores unless we had a mask.
Nobody knew what to do.
Nobody knew what to do, and we were erring on the side of caution. I think
flatten the curve, right?
Yeah, flatten the curve. Try to, we were all doing that, and some of us didn't believe, and some of us did, but largely we all sort of followed suit when we went to the store, when we went to the doctor, when we were given the opportunity to go to the movies or stay home. Many of us decided, well, maybe I'll stay home. Well, in China, under the Chinese policy, as we have been discussing for months now, there is no decision except the Chinese government's decision, which is, guess what? You get to stay home and we're going to bolt your door closed. And if your dog escapes, we're going to eliminate that problem.
With a shovel.
Yeah.
Zero COVID policy.
Right. That's right. So this unprecedented experiment in the way China, operates is reshaping its economy, just like our economy's been reshaped. Now, the zero COVID, I find it very hard to even say zero COVID strategy because it's so far from zero COVID in reality. But this is what they're trying to do. So anyway, harsh lockdowns, mostly in Shanghai. We saw all of it in Shanghai. We saw the flying drones and people screaming out of their buildings. 25 million people confined to their homes or their apartments. The first element of this involves that. That's the strategy against COVID-19. We'll lock you down. We'll make sure you don't have any contact with anybody else. You can't possibly spread it except among your own family. And if you get sick, you go away for a while until we can prove you're not sick anymore. The second element in this strategy that China is operating under is to continue to close its borders. So we're not only now talking about China's people inside China, now we're talking about anybody outside of China that can't come in. So they're essentially turning themselves into a hermit kingdom,
like North Korea.
Like North Korea. It's really amazing because some of the economies we're talking about they're locking out are Australia and the United States and Canada and India and a bunch of these really large population countries that have different ways they're dealing with COVID. And, some would argue fairly well. I mean, look, India's got a whole bunch of people and their COVID problem, as near as I can tell by reading the press, is not nearly as bad as China's problem. And they're dealing with it in a different way.
I think a lot of countries have come to the conclusion that this Omicron may well be the ticket out of COVID, of the COVID pandemic, because we'll all get it.
That's right.
And we'll all get over it.
Well, it's the measles. It's the old, it's the measles party. Wait, the Halbert girls got measles? Let's go over and visit. That's what happened.
One of the interesting stories I remember from the Spanish flu of 1918 was the Inuits up in Alaska, we used to call Eskimos. They were very remote at that time, at the turn of the century, and you had to get there by sled dog. I mean, you just couldn't get to these people, and yet a year later, they all wound up with the Spanish flu. It's just, I always found a whole bunch of a lockdown and isolation, rather amusing.
Well, Captain Cook arrived in Hawaii and everybody got sick.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. Yeah. Anyway, so let me just let me end this up here. Despite rapidly declining COVID rates around the world, China shows few signs of changing its closed border policy. Last month, Beijing announced it will no longer host the Asian Cup football tournament next summer.
Oh.
That's fairly big.
It is.
Fairly large group gathering of athletes. They call it football. We call it soccer. It's, the world sport. And they're suggesting that the policy will remain in effect for some time now. After that.
So they're almost like retreating like North Korea. I wonder if they find value in isolating themselves.
Well, They
and
did for
North
many
Korea
years.
certainly has COVID there too,
Yeah.
and they're having a tough time.
I'm thinking maybe from like a more of like a geopolitical standpoint. Are they seeing an advantage to using this as a trigger to isolate themselves from the rest of the world, like North Korea has?
What do you think, Jonty? Because I value your opinion on this, on international things like this. Do you think China's policy is really hurting them more than they think it is?
It's pretty strange. China's economic activity over the past several decades has relied so much on inviting international business folks over, wining and dining them, and working out some kind of deal.
Taking their money.
If we're going to and providing a variety of services that are beneficial and profitable to Western businesses as well.
Yeah.
It's really quite strange. I'm not really sure what happens in that regard if you lack that I mean, are they doing it on Zoom? I don't know. But one thing I really want to point out with regards to this particular story is that you all remember Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, who most of us, I believe myself included, considered to be somebody who was somewhat compromised by pro-Chinese policy influence. You know, he was a guy who was very apologetic for and/or appreciative of China's COVID policies at a time when it may have warranted more criticisms, particularly with regard to their transparency as to how the whole thing happened. Tedros is actually being quite critical of China in this regard. He's coming out saying this zero COVID stuff is not sustainable. Which is, and Beijing's not real happy with the guy. So I find that interesting. He's maybe not, as compromised an individual as we might have imagined him to be.
Or somebody's checked and get in the mail.
There you go. Didn't reach him. So with respect to COVID, one of the strategies that China has adopted is the certificate you get on your cell phone attesting to whether you are COVID positive or COVID negative.
Green or red.
Yeah. And there's yellow. There's a caution, too. So if you happen to pass through a city in which there is COVID, you'll get a yellow banner. So those who have green are free to move about to the extent that they are free to move about, which means that they can take transportation from one place to the next. They can go into a grocery store, a restaurant, or whatnot. Those who have red are locked out, essentially canceled. You're out of here. You can't go into any place. You can't travel. You can't do anything. So this story is about those COVID certificates that you get on your cell phone. A story out of Reuters. And it comes to pass that some of the Chinese banks are running short on money, really short on money, to the extent that they're not giving their depositors any money. For 2 months, they're withholding the money. Now, I don't know how many banks are doing it, but as I understand it, it's not the great big banks like the Bank of China that can print money. It's the little banks, the community banks that can't print money are the ones that are having trouble getting enough money to give their depositors.
Now, is this a transportation issue because of if you pass through a COVID place?
No.
Okay.
No. So the story is, what happens if you don't get your money? If your money is locked up in the bank for 2 months and you can't get it out, what are you going to do? You're going to yell and hoot and holler, and you're going to, get a baseball bat and bang on windows and where's my money?
You're going to do that here.
Yeah.
Now, in China, if you do that, do you go away?
So what happens when you do it in China? This is what happens in the central area of Henan. There was one bank that withheld $178 million from its depositors and businesses for 2 full months, and it still hasn't put forth any money. So all of those people who have money in the bank can't get it out to buy anything. It's locked in. And this is happening in smaller banks throughout China. So what they decided to do was go to Henan and get their money. So they gathered from all over central China and made moves to go to Hainan to get your money. Now, before you make any travel plans in China, you have to log into the internet and tell people where you're going. I'm going to Hainan to get my money back.
Everybody logged in.
So 200 people logged into the computer logging system and said, I'm going to Hainan to get my money back. And the next day, their cell phones turned from green to red, and they couldn't go anywhere. So what China is doing is demanding everybody tell them where they're going. And once they know where you're going, they just turn you off. They cancel you. So all of these people are stuck out there in the wilderness with no money and no way of getting their money.
And a red cell phone.
And a red cell phone to boot.
Well, you know what I find interesting about your story? If you think about it for a second, especially with the smaller regional banks where they're probably located geographically close to the people, right? If you're locked down and you can't travel, but you essentially have to get out for essentials, it becomes a cash economy. And you can imagine a lot of these people are probably short on cash.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't get any cash out of your...
Because if I can't leave my house because I'm red, I could maybe sneak out if I have an opportunity, but I don't have to be cash because I don't want to be trapped.
I don't want to use a payment app. You don't have any way of getting anywhere. Yeah. You're red. You're dead.
I'd really like to say something about how China is providing us with this wonderful guidebook as to how all of these emerging technologies can be used to create a dystopian nightmare. But maybe I should follow up with that after the break.
Yeah, 1984. It's on the way.
Okay, wait a minute. We're going to take our quick break here, and we'll finish up this story when we get back, and then we'll get into the big story about the first ever get-together between China's and the America's defense ministers.
Ooh, that'll be good.
All right, comrades, stay tuned. Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Senior Computer Vision Engineer, Gestures at Magic Leap Incorporated. Position located in Sunnyvale, California. Build the research and development effort of advanced product critical computer vision components covering key product critical perception features. Must have bachelor's degree or foreign equivalent in computer science, electrical engineering, or related, plus 5 years experience in position offered, research engineer, or related. Alternatively, employer will accept master's degree or foreign equivalent in computer science, electrical engineering, or related, plus 1 year experience in position offered as research engineer or related. Must have 1 year experience with C and or C++, programming and or debugging, OpenCV, computer vision, machine learning, deep learning with knowledge of either TensorFlow, PyTorch, or CAFE. Send resume to Magic Leap Incorporated, attention C. Owley, job ID number SCVEG, 7500 West Sunrise Boulevard, Plantation, Florida, 33322.
If you think things couldn't get any worse, think again. We're all now in completely uncharted territory, all of us, from the entire COVID-19 scenario to covert climate engineering operations in our skies to unfolding ecological collapse around the world. Converging catastrophes are closing in from countless directions. What cards will the controllers play next? Tune into the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on KSCO 1080 AM. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.
Do you ever wonder if you can know the truth?
Jesus said, you can know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
So dwell on truth with us.
Sunday at 11 a.m.
I'm Daniel Bodwin.
And I'm Brenton Powers.
We're Christians and missionaries.
And we'll be answering your commonly asked questions from the Bible about God and humanity and salvation.
So join us for the Dwell on Truth show, every Sunday from 11 a.m. to noon here on KSCO.
To protect his family from disaster, Steve used his camera phone.
Done.
By taking pictures of his important documents, Steve can always have them stored online. Learn more simple disaster prep tips at ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hey, we are back. This is China Watch Radio, and we are watching China today. We have Susan Simon in there. Hello, Susan. We didn't get to hear from you to start the show, so here we are.
Hello.
There you go. And right now we're talking about what happens when your phone turns red.
Well, Jonty brought up a really great scenario right before the break. And do you want to elucidate on that a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things I want to mention with regards to David's point about this situation putting pressure on currency within China. China is one of the countries that's moving very aggressively toward a digital currency. India is already in a situation where I would actually have to ask my buddy in Gujarat province what's really happening on the ground. But I believe India's already moved to a cashless economy. I don't know how successful that's been, but China's intending to move very aggressively towards a digital currency. And I'm trying to find it now. I was trying to find it during the break, but somewhere there's one of these international organizations that makes decisions for us without letting us know that has published a whole schedule for the rollout of digital currencies worldwide. The U.S. is certainly on the list. And as I recall, most of them were talking about the EU and the UK and the US instituting digital currencies in 2023, 2024.
Jonty, aren't we almost there, though? They're training us how to do it with these. I got a new plastic card that, you don't even have to pull it out of your wallet. You just walk up next to the thing and it takes the money out if you've made some kind of a transaction in the store.
And not only that,
exactly.
but what's really working on this is the fact that money is dirty, physically dirty. And when you're in a pandemic, as we are, and you try to go to, there's a local bakery here, a very famous local bakery that no longer takes cash because it's dirty.
That's right.
And it takes time. And so this is the situation. We're no doubt going to be in a situation soon when we all have digital currency to buy bitcoins with. And so we'll be buying nothing with nothing.
One of my problem-solving strategies is to look at the solutions that people are providing in order to try to figure out what the actual problems are. Often you'll come across a problem and then somebody's telling you what the solution is, and the solution, strangely enough, doesn't really seem to match the problem. I think we've seen an awful lot of that with regards to the pandemic. I think a lot of folks are maybe a little bit aware of this more than they used to be. Nobody said get a bunch of exercise, lose some weight, take some vitamin D. Nobody said that except I think was it Costa Rica did. But if you look at the problem, apparently money's dirty. Cash can be exchanged without any sort of oversight, so it opens up the possibility of criminal enterprise, which I suppose would be eliminated if we were all using a digital currency that was completely observable. So if all of your transactions are transparent, this could lead to this wonderful golden age wherein if you want to buy a little something in the back alley, well, you can't do it because you don't have a way of exchanging anything of value. Maybe you'd have to go
barter.
You'd have to go and trade your toaster or something. So it creates an interesting prospect, and this is something. Remember Larry Summers, the Goldman Sachs alumni, who was a very vocal element on Obama's early cabinet. He was we got to do this as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things about a digital currency is that and one of the differences between a credit card and a digital currency is, first of all, that aspect of transparency. You would still have to get a warrant in order to view a person's bank accounts, bank statements, etc. To the extent to which that really provides a meaningful protection for us in the age.
Well, wait a minute. Unless you're the IRS,
question mark.
Unless you're the IRS, they can look at your bank account.
No, I don't believe so. Actually, that's one of the things that has recently been pushed. They're trying to push that thing where any transaction over $500 is allowed to be viewed by the IRS. But providing you aren't making any transactions or it's under $500 in a given period of time, the IRS still isn't allowed to look at your bank account.
Well,
for now. That's going to be a fight. And the reason it should be a fight is we don't want to find ourselves in the exact scenario that China is explaining the downside of.
Their illustration though is what we're going to have to take to account here.
But now the other aspect of a digital currency, and probably something China's going to be very aggressive in using, is that it's programmable.
Right.
So you can decide how much money anyone can spend on anything. They already are using the social credit score system over there. But it would be a sort of another layer to that. So at the moment in China, you can get in trouble if you play too many hours of computer games.
All right. Well, we'll have to come back to that in a future program, I guess. So
to finish up the story of China's turning the cell phones red on people. Why are they turning the cell phones red? Because people are angry.
Control.
They can't get the money out of the banks. Why? Because the Chinese banks don't have enough money. Why? Maybe because they spent more than they earned or something like that. At any rate, they're sitting there holding on to people's money for 2 months. Ladies and gentlemen, how long could you get by without having access to your money? What would you do? You would protest, of course. Well, in China, they were going to protest, but the Chinese Communist Party flipped a switch and turned their cell phones from green to red and canceled those people who were going to protest.
Now, let me ask you the question, though, Michael. Did they really stop the protest? Not really.
Yes.
They stopped the manifestation of the protest.
This from Wang Jiong, who had her code turned red after she registered to travel to Henan. She told Reuters, "The police had my identity details from the last time I went to protest." And she has 2.3 million yuan, which is $341,000, locked up in that bank and unable to get to it. Now, here's what China's National Health Commission told Reuters about the use of its health codes. This is the red and the yellow and the green health codes. This is what the China's national health people say, that these codes should not be expanded without the authorization and cannot be assigned other than in connection with the prevention and control of the epidemic. But what does the CCP say? The hell with you. We're going to take this technology and we're going to control the people. So that's the story of
But you answered my question, though, because I contend that the protest isn't stopping. They're just... So how she protested, how she changed the protest, was she went to Reuters. Now, we all know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the protest didn't stop.
Well, and thanks to Reuters, Reuters told the story.
Like squeezing a balloon, right? I mean, you choke off one point and it expands somewhere else, right?
Well, I have to ask, I'd really like to know, Michael, what you think. China has such strong control over their citizens' access to foreign media. How did this story get out?
Yeah, exactly.
From Reuters. And Reuters knew somebody, and they probably got it out, who knows, maybe flying in and out of the country.
How did it get smuggled out, though, out of a country that torques down its media better than anybody else?
Well, there are a lot of expats who are there from the West with VPN access that punches out, and so they can actually...
So how does that work?
It actually tunnels through, and it's an encrypted tunnel, basically, that punches through the internet. And when you make a connection, then from the outside, it can't be censored or stopped. Now, the Chinese citizens, the amount of encryption that they have to stand up a VPN line is something that can be broken. It's a certain bit length that can be broken by the CCP by law. However, a lot of the Western companies are there have much more robust digital certificates. And in fact, as part of the agreement, they can attach back to their corporate networks to, for commerce reasons and meetings and sharing of data and information privately. But that also becomes then a conduit to send information out if you know somebody.
Right. So if you're a company like Reuters in Russia, in China, or anywhere, you have connection to your home office
through the VPN tunneling. Yes.
Through this VPN tunnel. Yeah. Does that make sense, Jaunty?
That's it's a sort of digital arms race with regards to the VPNs.
Sure.
I still find it interesting that the story came to light in Western media.
I do too.
I mean, it's a couple hundred protesters. I mean, how big of a story is it in mainland China? Are they aware of it there?
Well, evidently, it's a big story in mainland China because it's happening throughout China.
But
in a lot of these smaller banks,
right? But I think what Jonty's alluding to is this: it may be a big story throughout China if you look at the entire country as a whole, but because they torqued their media down so bad, it's just a little 200 people here and 200 people there.
But
that's the way it's being perceived.
I'll bet when the banks stopped giving out their money, that word about that is going to spread like wildfire. And from person to person to person, I'll bet the whole country
like
learns
COVID-19
about it
itself, it'll spread.
Yeah,
it'll spread like Omicron. Well, now
it'll spread like Omicron.
which Western countries have adopted a similar health pass?
I don't know of any.
Well, I have a card in my wallet.
Well,
I got a card in my wallet. It's not on my phone yet. It doesn't turn red yet.
You have a.
I can name a couple. I don't know all of them, but I can name a couple.
Who?
Israel, Russia, Germany, Italy, France.
Wow.
I don't know about Spain. The UK. The UK has kind of retired it a bit.
I believe Japan has it too.
Australia, New Zealand. Oh, I don't know about Japan. Interesting. So it is technology that's been implemented in the West, and that's part of what makes me real cagey about China sort of showing us a potential future if
showing
we should
us the way.
And there must be a sort of activist course through legislature to protect rights in such a way that
that's what China's National Health Commission says. You can't use this for that, but that's not stopping anybody from doing that. So there you go.
Yeah, you know.
Once the genie is out of the bottle, right? Who's going to put that genie back in the bottle? I don't know.
By the way, when I was thinking about the VPN and virtual private networking when I was in China, I actually had a couple of locals who were looking at my computer, and I VPN'd back and I showed them a picture of Tank Man. And we looked at,
really?
We did a search of Tiananmen Square, and we looked at the results and go, what the heck is this? It was just all alien to them.
They'd never seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're pretty much completely locked out.
See, that's what I'm saying about the 400 people here and the 200 people there, and their little places, and they all know that they're not going to be able to get their money. But do they know that the whole country can't? I don't think so yet.
So we'll move on from that, but it is an interesting story, and it does portend what all of us are going to be facing in the future, because this technology is going to be probably used by just about everybody that can. But it gets right down to it.
We've all got a Visa card now, don't we?
There you go. So we're going to move on to a very significant change in the temper of our times between China and the United States. And we note a lot of belligerence in the air, and the story is going to kind of define that. And it's a story out of the Blaze, but it's been carried on a lot of networks. And it's about the story of China and the United States sending their defense ministers to Singapore to get together and have a conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, they flew all the way to Singapore, and their meeting lasted 30 minutes. Oh. Can you imagine?
Folks, do you know how long it takes to fly to Singapore from the United States?
15 hours. I've done it many times.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and so we're talking about, the people who run the defense ministries for China. That would be General Fenghe And for the United States, it's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. So they got together and they had their words. And so I'm going to try to tell you what words they did have in a few moments here. We'll start with General Fenghe, and this was quoted by his defense spokesperson. And General Fenghe says, if anyone dares to split Taiwan from China, the Chinese army will definitely not hesitate to start a war, no matter the cost. And he said also, Beijing will smash to smithereens any effort to maintain Taiwan's independence. And he said also, Taiwan is China's Taiwan. Using Taiwan to contain China will never prevail. So there's a little bit of belligerence in that. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin responds, China has been steadily increasing its provocative and destabilizing military activity near Taiwan. True enough. Must refrain from further destabilizing actions toward Taiwan. U.S. remains focused on maintaining peace, stability, and the status quo across the Taiwan Strait. And he's hinted at what China is thinking about doing is exactly what Russia did. Big, strong country rolling over a defenseless neighbor. And how the world looks down on that kind of behavior and suffer the consequences of the embargoes and whatnot that fell upon Russia. But, we notice that Russia and China are booting up their relationship again. Also, Secretary Austin maintains that the People's Liberation Army needs to keep open lines of communications and quit sneaking around and doing weird things. So there's a very interesting close from Secretary of Austin in which he says that the United States will maintain its one China policy. Now, there's a certain strategic ambiguity in this notion. So I'm going to read you what this one China policy is as defined by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It says, the United States recognizes the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, but only acknowledges the Chinese position that Taiwan is part of China. Thus, the United States maintains formal relations with the PRC and has unofficial relations with China. Now, does that make any sense at all?
Oh, yeah. Does to me.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about saving face.
There you go. That's exactly what it is.
So we can maintain that because we bolstered their military in Taiwan. We've extended quite an envelope of protection to them over the years, and we've have very deep economic ties between the two countries. By keeping that ambiguity, we're not actually slapping Chinese face. We're not actually throwing it back into their faces, right, where they have to feel like they need to take action or become defensive.
Yes.
Now, saving face is very complicated. It sounds like a simple concept. But trust me when I tell you this. I know from personal experience, saving face is very difficult to pull off elegantly. Very.
Yeah.
No, I'm really serious.
Well,
if a facial twitch the wrong way when you're saying something like our diplomat said.
So what's really important to understand this for our listeners is that it's used as a weapon. This whole notion of saving face, and so like as soon as they get into something that they're, you say something that they're not interested in, it's like, I'm now offended, right? You need to kowtow to me. You need to apologize because you've offended me.
That's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I'm saying.
So you are walking on eggshells. It's almost like dealing with somebody with a borderline personality disorder. It's really easy to trigger them, and they enjoy being triggered because to them it's an offensive weapon. What I always remind people, though, is the Chinese. A lot of the Asian cultures, this is pretty true, not just of China, but they stop losing face when they decide it's in their best interest.
That's
to not
correct.
play that game.
There you go. Now, can you imagine these two alpha males, if there are such a thing left in the world, and it might not be, I don't know. But at any rate, these two alpha males, the Secretary of Defense for China and the Secretary of Defense for the United States, fly to Singapore, walk into the room, and spend 30 minutes.
They take one look at each other, and 30 minutes is all it took for them to leave.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
but that's also very Asian. I mean, that passive aggressive activity is also typical of part of a negotiation.
Well, if you've ever been around the upper echelon of the United States military, it's not only China.
Yeah. So this is where it's called wolf diplomacy when it gets right down to it, right? This is the latest phrase, the wolf diplomacy, where you are belligerent. There's a marked belligerence to this kind of diplomacy, and so that really defines the world that we're in right now.
Well,
more this belligerence, and so where is it going to lead?
Well, let me take this concept, what we're talking about, just a little step farther, because I have been fascinated by an article that was on our list of stuff. And by the way, if you want to see what we are talking about, there's a really, Jonty does an awful lot of work posting this on our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com. Look at the show prep page, know before you go to the show, listen to the show, and it's all there. China says in an article, this was put together by the staff writers at CNA, the publication. Apparently, China believes it will be able to take on Taiwan and all of its allies by 2027. Now, that seems like a long time away, but it's really not.
No.
The Chinese military says it would be capable of fighting against Taiwan and any allied forces together by 2027, the Ministry of National Defense report said yesterday. Now, China has set a goal of modernizing its warfare capabilities by that year. That's to mark the 100th anniversary of the Army's founding. But I think that's a pretty bold statement.
Well, Billy, I think I think that's maybe it. It's not so much. I would hazard a guess that it's not so much that they're going to have all of this new military capability in 4 more years. It's that anniversary date that's the trigger.
There you go. Yeah. The other thing that happened just today,
saving face.
Is that Xi Jinping signed a declaration changing the essential mission of the People's Liberation Army to include the following: diffuse risks and challenges, tackle emergencies, protect the safety and property of the people, safeguard China's sovereignty, security, and development interests, as well as maintain global peace and regional stability. So,
that's code.
That's code for we can do whatever we want.
It's also code for we're going to protect culture, meaning Taiwan. We're going to take it back and protect it, and we don't care what the rest of the. That's pretty much code.
We don't care what the rest of the world thinks.
Right.
And so Xinhua News Agency has been telling everybody, "Oh no! He really doesn't mean it that way."
Yeah, wrong.
He doesn't mean it.
This is giant saving face. It really is. You know what I'm talking about, right? Dave knows what I'm talking about.
So why are we saving face? Why are we so worried about face at this point in time? That's the question we're going to ask you when we get back from this break. Phone numbers are 479-1080. This is China Watch Radio. I want you to pick up your phone and tell us why the belligerence.
Per hour tomorrow morning, winds could gust as high as 23 miles per hour. There is a small craft advisory that just ended and a gale warning that has just gone into effect. That'll be in effect until about 9 p.m. tonight. Boaters forecast for tonight, west winds 15 to 25 knots, gusts up to 35 knots, wind waves 5 to 6 feet. And tomorrow, west winds 15 to 20 knots with gusts up to 25 knots, wind waves 5 to 6 feet once again. The time now, 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Those are war drums, Chinese war drums. We hear them, and they are in the air. This is China Watch Radio, and today we've got the crew here. We have Billy Graff on the boards here. Hello, Billy.
Hello, sir.
Jaunty up in the woods.
Hey, everyone.
And David Welsh here.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Susan on the boards.
Hello.
And Michael Olson. And we're watching China. And one of the things we're watching is our relationship with China with respect to a meeting that was held here very recently in which our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, flew to Singapore for a meeting with China's Secretary of Military Defense, General Fenghe, and the two got together in Singapore for a whole half hour. Can you imagine what kind of meeting you have that takes a half hour?
Well, I'm imagining flying 20 hours from Washington, D.C. to Singapore, have a half-hour meeting, and then fly 20 hours back.
There you go. At least they didn't have to fly coach, probably, right? But so we're looking at this situation, and we're seeing a lot of new belligerence in the air. We're seeing that China says that any effort to split us from Taiwan will be smashed to smithereens. That doesn't sound very diplomatic. And we're seeing a situation where the President of the United States says, we will defend Taiwan. And so we see a lot of face being lost in the meetings here, and we're wondering where this is going to go. So that's the subject we have on the table today, and we're curious to know what you think. And the phone numbers today are 831-479-1080. Pick up your phone and tell us where you think all of this belligerence is going to take us, and why? Why all the belligerence? What on earth is happening to cause our two sides to be so belligerent? What's going on? Jaunty.
Right. Well, before the break, Billy was talking about this report. It's actually in the Taipei Times from the Taiwanese Ministry of National Defense. Mm-hmm. And they're suggesting that China will be able to, they say, take on or occupy Taiwan and defeat their various allies by the year 2027. Now, part of the reason I wanted to actually bring this article to all of your attention is that last week in discussion, I was suggesting that by 2027, China would no longer be able to take on Taiwan. I'm about to celebrate my 12th wedding anniversary, and so I am keenly aware of the fact that I have the potential to be wrong.
Well said. Well said.
But that said, I also want to add a few caveats to that story. This is the Taiwanese making this report, and they have a certain agenda with regards to opening up more procurement of military hardware and hardening their military alliances. So they don't really have much of an incentive to play down the potential military threat posed by China. But as in terms of how we understand this problem of Taiwan vis-a-vis China and the potential for China to go ballistic on it, one of the big questions that I would like us to do a good job of answering is in terms of China's actual ability to do it. It really comes down to numbers. How many of what sort of hardware do they have? What sort of a military do they have? How does Taiwan stack up? What would be the challenges of an invasion of Taiwan? I think those form very interesting discussions and would also be very illuminating. I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts or opinions about China's ability to actually successfully invade Taiwan.
Well, I think it's technically possible for them to make it a success, but I firmly believe that they're going to have to go through a coalition of countries that are willing to help Taiwan. I just don't. If Taiwan fails in the eyes of the United States government or Australia's government or New Zealand's government or Japan's government or South Korea's government, I see a giant problem in that area of the world. If Taiwan is allowed to go back to China, taken back, much like Putin has taken back, parts of the Ukraine, I just don't think that the other countries I just mentioned are going to allow that to happen.
Well, when I was in Taiwan, too, the reason why most of their army is on their smaller outer islands was that they realized if China could take those smaller islands, they actually then officially own part of Taiwan. From a political standpoint, becomes a little bit more tenuous. They're also a lot more concerned about being isolated as a country, and that once those smaller islands were taken, it would have an enormous deleterious effect on their economy. And then the Navy of China would be able to then choke off the island in terms of its participation in the world economy and to be able to strangle them over time. Or they necessarily wouldn't have to invade and level the island, that there are ways that they could actually strangle it.
It's really interesting that all of this has seemed to really blown up with the election of President Joe Biden. Or am I wrong?
No, there was a marked change, and it was recently in one of his speeches.
Yeah, and we did not seem to have this issue when President Trump was in office,
or any of the other previous presidents, because the tone, the whole rhetoric about Taiwan has always been downplayed and low-keyed, always.
Well, one of the things I've been doing my homework on, if you guys are interested to hear it, is just a brief history of recent China-U.S. military relations. So in 2011, General Chen Binghe, chief of the PLA General Staff, I don't think you can get much higher than that in the Chinese military, came out and visited the U.S. And spent a little time here, gave a presentation to a room full of top U.S. military brass. He said, and I quote, "The world has no need to worry, let alone fear China's growth." He made a variety of other placating statements with regards to, look, the Chinese military isn't a threat to you guys. Although he did mention that he was concerned about arms sales to Taiwan, that was one of the things China was going to be watching and was one of their main concerns. In 2016, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral John Richardson visited China. He met with his Chinese counterpart. He walked around on the Liaoning aircraft carrier. He got to see a Chinese submarine. It was all smiles and handshakes and discussions of better cooperation, helping to avoid any kind of mistakes or anything like that. It's worth noting that in 2014, a Chinese, I don't remember what designation, a Chinese fighter plane intercepted a U.S. electronic warfare plane. I think they're called P-8s, and did some rather dangerous maneuvers, let's say. It's apparently a very famous thing in China that people have posters up of this Chinese warplane doing barrel rolls in front of a U.S. spy plane.
Yeah, the Ju-16s. In fact, they've been firing chaff. They've been coming within a few feet of our planes, and they're actually firing chaff to clog the engines to force them down.
Well, that just happened recently. Yeah. Absolutely, David. The Admiral John Richardson said something very interesting that I thought was just worth noting, because I think it gives a lot of perspective to this relationship. It's something that we should be aware of ourselves, because we're on one side of a certain curtain trying to figure out what's going on. He said, so we had a nice discussion about the role of media, how the media is influencing populations, maybe raising expectations or raising emotions. As leaders, we've got to make sure we keep all of this in perspective. So if there's an initial emotional response, okay, fine, but we've got to get past that to a responsible relationship where we can judge each other on our professional behaviors and always try to mitigate tensions and mitigate risks. I found that quite interesting because it really points the finger at us in terms of being responsible journalists. We are essentially the media in a regard, and we do want to be sort of level-headed as we can be and not be overly emotional about this stuff. Okay, so in 2017, the U.S. and China created the Joint Strategic Dialogue Mechanism. I don't really understand what this exactly means, but essentially what it means is that they're going to talk. It's like a red phone or something, where if there's a problem, they know at what level to have a discussion about it to resolve it. So if there's an incident, instead of sending out some kind of patrol in an aggressive way or something, instead of doing that, they'll get on the phone and they'll be like, so what the heck's going on, guys? And just have this mechanism in place to try to de-escalate in the case of some sort of accident or something. Now, again, returning to that idea that China is very concerned about military hardware procurement by Taiwan. So I went and I found the Wikipedia page for U.S. military sales to Taiwan, and I tried to look through it to see anything recent that would be out of character, be sort of different. The U.S. has been supplying Taiwan with F-16s for quite a long time. Lots of different weapon systems. Almost all of them have a maximum range of something like 70 miles or something like that. So they are essentially defensive weapons. But in 2020, the U.S. supplied 135 AGM-84H standoff land attack missiles. They have a 170-mile range, and they could be launched from the Taiwanese fighter planes. That's a weapon that could definitely be used to attack mainland China in the event of some kind of military escalation. I found that interesting, and I think that's something worth keeping an eye on. There were two other procurements. One was for the long-range torpedoes, which we discussed in the past. Often the torpedoes, the heavy torpedoes of today, can have a range of 50 to 100 miles. So we're talking about a long-range ability to blow up your opponent's ships. And then the other was 100 Harpoon missiles. If you're going to invade Taiwan, the Harpoon missile is a state-of-the-art way to blow up a ship, essentially.
John,
so I found all of that interesting.
Yeah, no, I think what I've seen is that we've been providing these additional weapons, but it's been commensurate with the growth of Chinese offensive military capability against Taiwan. And a lot of that looks like has been anti-aircraft and anti-ship capability, which does make a lot of sense if you're trying to develop more of a standoff defensive capability for the island.
Well, now Taiwan's been developing its own cruise missiles to be able to strike mainland China. And in some recent exchanges, and I'm sorry I can't quote off the top of my head, but in some recent exchanges, Taiwan has said, if you guys attack us, be prepared for all of the strikes that are going to happen on mainland China. That's something we've talked about in the past. Taiwan's domestically created ballistic missiles. Yeah. Now, there's one more thing I want to note real quick, guys, and I thank you for being patient with me. I just wanted to note that after this bellicose meeting that we've been discussing, this 30 minutes.
All 30 minutes.
The Taiwanese Mainland Affairs Council, they're the folks in Taiwan that are in charge of communicating with the mainland China. They were pretty upset. They referred to the statements as a declaration of war in complete defiance of the principle of peace in international relations. and that the address proved the Beijing authorities to be the root cause of serious instability in the region. Some pretty strong words. Now, Ma Xiaoguang, a spokesperson for the Beijing-based CCP Taiwan Affairs Office, walked back the general statements considerably, saying that Taipei is distorting China's policy, hyping up the mainland's so-called military threat, and of course, in quotes here, exposing their sinister intention to internationalize the Taiwan issue. I'm curious what you guys think of the meaning of that statement.
I think the Taiwan situation is an international situation.
Well, it was interesting, too. I mean, this really had flared. It seemed like it had flared when President Biden was in Japan, and when the reporter asked him, would we aggressively defend Taiwan, he says, yes. Just a real simple yes. It was pretty unambiguous. It seemed to have got quite a reaction out of mainland China.
Well, because as I mentioned before, our previous presidents, both political parties, have been really low-keying this and avoiding answering the question.
Yeah, it's been backdoor. It hasn't been public.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And this made it public.
Strategic ambiguity.
Or as one of the Bushes said, strategery.
That's right.
Anyway, we do have a telephone call. Bill in Salinas would like to comment on what we're talking about. Bill, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yes, hi, guys. I'm our Navy retired captain, so I have a little bit of knowledge about our Navy and its capabilities.
Great.
I think it's fair to say that Taiwan is not recognized as an independent country internationally by anybody. It's not part of the United Nations, not part of any of the UN agencies like UNESCO or World Health and so on.
Well, not even by the Olympic Committee.
Yeah, well, and the United States doesn't have an embassy there. I don't think anybody does. And we haven't ever since we recognized China and the One China policy. And you guys probably know more about that than I do. I think that was 1979. And before that, we had a mutual defense treaty, but that doesn't exist. We have nothing to take and deal with when it comes to, going to their aid. On top of that, based on my knowledge as a naval guy, the United States Navy could not defend China or Taiwan from China. We would really it'd be a bad show for the U.S. Navy. We don't have the tools to do it. So it's when President Biden made that statement, it was foolish because there was no treaty, and we don't have the capability of doing it.
Go ahead, Billy. Stop for just a second there and answer this for me. What do you mean when you say the United States Navy in that part of the world doesn't have the capability of defending Taiwan?
Well, the Chinese have developed a large network of weapons and ships and planes and that can defend China itself, and those weapons and that reach out over Taiwan range-wise. I mean, they got missiles that can go out 1,000, 1,200 miles. We would not be able to sail our ships within that range without them being at very, very big risk of being sunk by missiles from China. We typically in the Pacific Ocean we have one aircraft carrier, right?
Wrong.
Carrier may have
that statement's incorrect. I know that from personal experience. I grew up on Guam.
Well, wait a minute. We have a lot of aircraft carriers, but not all of them are at sea at the same time, nor are they deployed at the same time.
Well, there's at least two in that region all the time.
We have a number of aircraft carriers. About a third of them are battle ready and ready to be operational. About a third are in the shipyards being repaired and updated, and about a third are under training and upgrading. So when it comes to the numbers game, that's it. And we keep a carrier in the Indian Ocean near the Persian Gulf and that. We keep carriers in the Atlantic. We don't have very many out in the Pacific. And by the way, I lived on Guam a couple of years myself. But a typical aircraft carrier has a limited number of combat aircraft, right? On the order of maybe 70.
Yes.
Okay, how many thousand aircraft does China have that they could put into the air?
1,600 roughly.
Yeah, so
What's that, John T? 1,600, you said?
Yeah.
so the odds are kind of strong. Besides, we have no kind of legal obligation to go to China's relief. We don't recognize them as an independent country. Anyway, I think a lot of the talk is just plain talk. Okay, so anyway, those are my thoughts. And by the way,
may I ask a quick question before you run off? Now,
yeah, sure.
There have been a lot of people who say that China is particularly vulnerable with respect to the oil it takes to run the country and how so much of that oil comes from the Middle East,
right,
via ship, and how vulnerable those ships would be to.
Well, that's true. Taiwan is pretty vulnerable to control of the shipping as well. Correct there. I think if I was, running China, I would see Taiwan as being a prize, not something you want to destroy. I mean, Russia is destroying parts of the Ukraine. If they end up winning it, they're going to have a bunch of rubble. If I was running China, I would take in pressure them economically until they decided, like Hong Kong and so forth did, it's better to become part of China than to be.
Well, that gets us to the question of the day, which is why the belligerence? Why we're going to smash everybody to smithereens here? Why don't you just be cool and let it happen? Mm-hmm. Why the belligerence?
Well, people might be scared and decide, hey, I don't want to be blown to smithereens, so let's go ahead and go along with them. I don't know. Mm-hmm. The Chinese psychology is something I don't have. But one last thought is the U.S. does war games, right? And the war games that involve Taiwan, if we go to their defense, we lose. So that's what the war gamers tell me. So anyway,
there you go.
That's my thought.
Captain, it was really great to hear from you.
Yeah.
Call back. Yeah.
Appreciate your perspective.
I enjoy your show, guys. You do a good job. Okay. Bye-bye.
I'm here looking at a website that displays locations of U.S. carrier strike groups. It's telling me as of May 3rd, I guess that's a little outdated, that there are...
Not really. It takes a little while to move an aircraft carrier group.
That there are four that are all at sea or at a foreign port, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are in local ports.
Mm-hmm. So the captain was pretty close.
He was, yeah.
Local ports, what do you mean by that?
Well, in the U.S.
I see. Okay.
San Diego or Pearl Harbor or something.
I think one of them is in Canada, actually, but yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a terrible scenario just to think about.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants to go to war
in the Pacific.
Yeah. That'd be horrible.
And the impact it would have throughout the Western Pacific. It appears as though China is taking steps to essentially turn the South China Sea into a Chinese lake.
It's their lake, yeah.
Yeah, it's our lake. Yeah.
Well,
that means Guam, and that means the Philippines,
Japan,
and
South Korea.
The captain brought up a really good point, though. I think it's worth discussing a little bit further, which is, for a point of prestige, does China want Taiwan so bad that they're willing to scrape it as a rock and be able to count it as one of their provinces? Or do they want the economic might and power and prosperity that comes with the island, with the people, and try to absorb it somehow?
No, well, I can answer that because they had the what can only be considered as the economic jewel of that part of the world in a special agreement where everybody had a great time right up to the point when they didn't.
Hong Kong.
I'm talking about Hong Kong.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna do the same thing to Taiwan they did to Hong Kong. They're gonna ruin it.
Yeah. Sure, they're going to give everybody a medical banner to wear on their cell phone.
Yeah.
And as long as everybody behaves, it'll be just fine. But the moment you think wrong, you're going to get canceled.
Well, Hong Kong was a great place to visit, a great place to do business, and China benefited immensely from Hong Kong.
When I was a little kid, we had a really thick, heavy asphalt driveway in Minnesota, and it was a beautiful driveway. In fact, the guy who owned the house before us ran the roads department for the county.
There you go.
So, I'm sure there's some deal he got. But anyway, there was like this little volcano that was erupting in the driveway, and I was wondering what the heck that was, and and so I looked at a couple seasons, and eventually a little plant pushed through.
Wow.
And that reminds me of China, right? There's just that constant pressure, that unabating persistence of just pushing forward without stopping, that I think wins, right? That they outweight you. They play a long game that we're really not calculating. And then they find those, like Hong Kong's a good example, Billy, when you brought that up.
Yeah.
They had the opening, and bam, they went in and they took it.
Yeah.
When they got that opening.
I mean,
paid off.
Hong Kong was something else in its heyday. Yeah. It was unbelievable.
Well, and that's why I keep thinking that China plays three-dimensional chess and the rest of us are playing checkers.
Yeah.
Because they're waiting and watching.
Well, China does have proximity on its side, which is not small.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's the issue right there.
Yeah.
Is that China has the proximity.
Yeah.
And to the South China Sea.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be something that we have to learn to live with.
Yeah, I just want to mention, and it's something that I think is worth just keeping in mind. It brings balance to this sort of conversation. It's easy to get into the nitty gritty of the how and why and all that, and what all of the various different hardware is. And as Billy and I've have commiserated on in the past, I can dork out on this kind of stuff, but. When there's this kind of bellicosity, it's beneficial politically to the military brass. It's beneficial to the military-industrial complex of both nations, of both China and the U.S. And so they gain political clout, and so they influence the politics more, and it ends up being this sort of positive feedback loop and self-sustaining scenario. And the real losers in the scenario where we have a Cold War are the taxpayers of both countries. And the real losers, if we actually have a war, is bleeping everyone. Because a war between the United States and China is something that I do not want my children to have to live through.
I think that's a universal agreement. No, nobody in China wants a giant war either.
Are you sure about that? Let's take a break. What do you think, folks? Do you think China wants the war? 831-479-1080. Pick up your phones. Give us a call. We will be right back.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Did you know that most adults with autism are unemployed, and a major hurdle is the lack of job opportunities? That's why Autism Speaks is teaming up with Lee Container, the J. Donald and Laurel Lee Family Foundation Fund, and Delivering Jobs to create a more inclusive workforce in the U.S. Are you an HR professional, community leader, or business owner? Join us in creating a workforce where people of all abilities can contribute and thrive. To learn more, visit autismspeaks.org/employment.
User-Friendly Computing is Santa Cruz County's top-rated IT service and solutions provider since 1993. Here's why. Service and repair. Whether it's hardware or software, servers or a workstation, we'll fix it or find you a new one. Managed services. Optimize and protect your infrastructure with 24/7, 365 proactive monitoring. Cloud solutions. Cloud IT is the future of small and medium business technology management. Website design. Engage customers and grow your business with tools to update your own content. Backup and recovery. Ensure business continuity with a comprehensive backup and disaster recovery plan. And finally, security and compliance. Advanced security systems help protect your data and keep your business up and running. There's only one place to go for all your computer and IT solutions, User-Friendly Computing, 505 River Street in Santa Cruz. Give Peter and his friendly staff a call at 831-423-9653. And be sure to tell them you heard about it on KSCO.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Michaels with another Longevity product update. I want to tell you about the Healthy Bone and Joint Pack. This is one of our biggest sellers, and here's why. Not only do you get the Healthy Start Pack, which provides your 90 essential nutrients, but you also get a bottle of glucogel and a jar of CM cream. The Ultimate Glucogel is designed to support healthy cartilage, ligaments, tendons, and connective tissue. Ultimate CM Cream uses natural ingredients to provide relief from aches and pains and doesn't feel sticky or messy. The Healthy Start Pack, Ultimate Glucogel, and Ultimate CM Cream. These three things make up the Healthy Bone and Joint Pack. Remember, if you're looking for the 90 essential nutrients, they are included in the Healthy Bone and Joint Pack. Save money, feel better, and support your favorite radio station. Log on to KSCOHealth.com or call 831-218-5726. That's 831-218-5726 or visit KSCOHealth.com.
Are you interested in a radio show with tips and tools to help you unravel the mysteries of your personal finances? Would getting a firm understanding of the basic laws of money management help you out? Then listen to Money Moves on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Host Pamela Fugit-Hetrick and her guests provide information so that you can successfully manage your own money. Tune in to Money Moves Thursdays at 7 p.m. on KSCO AM 1080 Santa Cruz.
Welcome back. China Watch Radio. Last half hour, but you're calling. Pick up your phones, 831-479-1980. Why all the bellicosity right now? Why the anger? Why the threats? Why the smashing to smithereens? What on earth is going on? Billy, who's on the line?
Well, we have Dave in Corralitos. Dave, if I push the right button. Dave, you're on China Watch Radio.
Yes, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I've been listening to your show, and I agree with just about everything you're saying about China. Their Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, they don't give their people any rights at all, and they are very powerful, and they're looking to take over more and more, and Taiwan. I think they definitely would like to take over Taiwan, and I think...
Do you think they want to take over the whole world?
I think it's possible. Taiwan has those, they make those computer chips, but, aside from the computer chips, just the humanity of the people to be subject to, the brutalization of the way how the Chinese Communist Party treats their people, like when they had that recent lockdown, people, jumping out of their apartments and starving people. And, you're talking about that social credit score. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, Dave, it's interesting when you're in Taiwan, it is such a Western-leaning country compared to mainland China itself, and even Hong Kong, which was, definitely Western-leaning in the first world. But so many people I'd worked with in Taiwan were educated in the United States. It felt a lot like a flavor of California, actually, a lot of Taiwan. It was the culture was so radically different than mainland China.
Was Shanghai also like that way? Was Shanghai becoming very Western?
It always had kind of a Western lean or tilt to it, but even more so, I think, than Beijing for sure. Yes.
Do you think that's why Xi Jinping locked Shanghai down?
Well, there's a spirit of independence that you don't see in the nation, in their capital.
So I wonder, could China become the ruler of the world with its social credit system and its medical certificates on your cell phone?
Well, what's interesting is that they've come right out and said that we have the blueprint or the prototype for running the world, all right, that you should model after us. And they've actually demonstrated absolute adroit power within their own borders. I think the challenge we've been discussing on the show here is how strong is their ability to project that power outside and beyond their border? How far can they project it, right? Beyond Belt and Road, beyond what their money can reach, but in an absolute sense of power, how effective is it?
But think about this, though. Let me give you some examples. The United States, right near the Revolution, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, okay? All of these places fought to the death being controlled like China controls its people.
Yeah.
We're a prime example. The British gave up, man. They said,
nobody in China is fighting.
Well,
and the reason they're not fighting is because they are in jail. They are totally...
I get that, but the question you just asked, though, was can they transport that to other places in the world? I don't think they could. I don't think it ain't going to fly in the United States. It's sure not going to fly in Mexico. It won't fly in Canada.
No.
Well, right now, some people say that there's a strong globalist.
There you go.
There's strong globalist power, that's really trying to destroy America. But I think the good news is that there's politicians that are starting to come in that support the Constitution and support the USA. There recently was a flip over in Texas, for a Latin female healthcare worker that became a congresswoman. And the U.S. has to get their own house in order before we can even think about dealing with China. China's been stealing our technology for years. They have good military equipment. It's about troop transport. The U.S. is so deadly because we can move troops fast to other places. China could never do that, and now they're going to be able to do that. And we've got 100,000 troops. We're spending all the money, in Ukraine. Europe isn't putting any skin in the game. And Lloyd Austin, you talked about that meeting. I mean, this is a person that, we left Americans behind enemy lines in Afghanistan and left all that equipment in Afghanistan. The world doesn't have any respect for us, and rightly so. We have to get our own house in order before we can even think about fighting, China.
And do you think that China doesn't know that? Do you think that that's part of the reason for their bellicosity? They're looking at us, go, you guys are so weak. You can't fight your way out of a paper bag.
Well, it's all about
they're trying to weaken us, and it's working. It's working. The flag isn't dead. The eagle is not dead. The eagle is wounded, but it's not dead, and it's coming back.
But we've gone through this a lot in our history, though. I mean, I'm going to be 60 this year, and I remember as a kid in the 60s, pipe bombings and all kinds of things that went on in our schools, how tragic a lot of the activity was at the time. And there's this whole cathartic process that went on, right, that we worked through. And I think we're doing that today as well. I think there's a cathartic process that's happening around, are we going to become, part of the global blob, or are we going to maintain our independence and spirit of this country? And I think that debate is roaring, right?
Oh yeah, there's a huge fight, going on. We have so many. We used to be energy independent, and those rich politicians, they get free plane tickets, and what do those planes run on? They run on gas and diesel. What does the
good point, isn't it?
Run on?
Hey,
the
Dave,
equipment runs on gas and diesel. What are the boats used to get our fish? Right. It runs on gas and diesel.
Dave, you made some good points, but I got a full board I got to try to get to in the last 16 minutes.
Thanks for the call, Dave.
Thanks for calling. Call us back, would you?
Okay.
All right. Let's check in. Let's see who's next. That would be Arthur in Prunedale. You're on China Watch Radio.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Great program, and that caller who was just on was fantastic. He summarized so much of what I would have said. So what I want to say is Joe Biden will never go to war. I don't think any Democrat is going to go to war with China, and not even going to show strength and intimidate China as long as we can possibly do that. As the last gentleman caller said, look at Afghanistan. Biden's administration is so feckless, so weak. He picks his people on race, gender, national origin, sexual orientation. Doesn't go for competence.
Yeah, no merit in the picture.
People we have in there. Yeah. I mean, I think Biden will just fold up. Look, he already said publicly, hey, man, come on. Something to this effect. Come on, man. China's no threat to us. He might as well put up the white flag. They have no respect for him.
But
long
he
as we
did
have
just
somebody
say,
like-
but he did just say that he would fight for Taiwan. He said yes.
Oh,
He
yeah.
said yes.
Yeah, he said a lot of lies. He did a lot of plagiarism. You really trust what Joe Biden says? I don't. I don't trust him.
I
he
think
can
that
say anything he wants.
Well, I think it's important here, though. I think the United States has always had a posture of stepping in to support Taiwan, and even in an active fashion. I think we could have an argument or a debate on how the degree of activity that we would project forward in that defense. But I think that's always been part of the plan book. And I think what Biden had done as being part of, the Washington establishment for 50 years, just basically said, yeah, he confessed to what the plans actually were in the middle of the folders on the table.
Yeah.
Didn't we have
Which
an
is scary.
agreement with
Yeah.
Ukraine?
If you
Didn't
think
we
about
have
it,
an
Bob.
agreement, gentlemen? Didn't we have an agreement with Ukraine to defend them if they gave up their nuclear weapons? And what kind of defense do we turn out to do? We turn out to give them weapons. We're down on guns in our country, but boy, we wish the Ukrainian people had more guns. So let's give them a couple $2 billion. I mean, is this the kind of defense you're talking about for Taiwan?
John T. should bring up the other article and I think people should subscribe to the newsletter because there's a lot of depth in there. But Johnny, you were bringing up as well in that newsletter that we're going to have problems making ammunition because China controls some of the critical minerals to make powder.
Yes, that's true. That's one always has to be careful at the reason why a certain article is being published, because there's often some sort of policy that they're trying to affect, and there's a lot of action with regards to rare earths and getting them produced in Greenland, getting them produced in parts of the UK, getting them produced in the Midwest. So we'll see how long that bottleneck exists. It might be that somebody's seeing an opportunity here to affect policy such that we no longer are beholden to China to produce molybdenum and things like that.
Arthur, thanks for the call. Let's move on to Dan in Watsonville. Dan, you're on China Watch Radio.
Is David Wells still there?
Yes.
I want to know if he is a guy. I used to have a friend named David Welch. I haven't seen him in years. I wonder if it's the same one. You used to live in Aramis?
No, I haven't lived in Aramis. This might have been my doppelganger.
Oh, okay. Just a coincidence, the same name. All right, thank you.
Is that all there is?
Wow, that was it. Okay. Let's move on to John in Freedom. John, you're on China Watch Radio.
Thanks for taking my call. When it comes to who would win, I think if we break it down to this equation, the difference between creators and copycats. Creators usually are superior.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying then that we would probably prevail?
The United States has been always superior because we created our own defense, our own aggression, really our own mistakes.
See, this is actually a very important comment. It's actually very astute because what you're saying is that in the development is the creativity, and the creativity was the ideas for the inspiration for innovation. And that if you are just copying, you don't have that.
And you do not dare innovate in a totalitarian fascist regime.
New ideas.
Because if you're innovating, you're breaking somebody's rules.
John, that's a good point.
Yeah. You just sounds like you've been talking with me for a while. I'm glad.
We're telepathically linked to you, John.
Well, there's aspects of that, but I think it's worth pointing out that China is way ahead on things like salt-based nuclear reactors, and there's a variety of innovation happening in China. Maybe authoritarianism limits the scope of innovation, but you can still have a very effective, focused innovation in certain areas.
Especially when you steal it from everybody else in the world.
But there's a huge difference, though, between, because I've seen this when I spent my whole career over in Silicon Valley, there's a huge difference between an innovation of technology and being able to domesticate and deploy that technology to be able to implement it.
Yeah, amen.
Well, John, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, have we answered the question? No. Why so much bellicosity? Why do we have so much
urgency? Why the urgency?
There's
Why
something I mentioned last week that I'd love to follow up on real quick with regards to that exact question. It's something else I think that we should be aware of. And that is, I'm looking at an article here regarding TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Another thing that could be pissing China off is they're currently making a roughly $12 billion investment in a massive silicon wafer production facility in Arizona.
Yes.
Right. We're talking about 1,100 acres of land that they're developing.
Really?
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
So the Taiwan Semiconductor folks, with all of their expertise, are setting up shop over here in the U.S. That's something I imagine China's not super happy about.
No, the manufacturing prowess in Taiwan is unreal. I mean, when you go tour some of the factories that are assembling aircraft tools is a good example. I just bought a few aircraft tools, and they actually came from Taiwan. The precision and the quality of manufacturing is second to none. It's at a whole different league.
Wait a
than China
minute. Why
itself.
are you buying aircraft tools?
Well, it's part of the David Air Force.
So all of that technology, though, that is developed here finds its way quickly to China. Now, we tried to come to grips with that. Donald Trump instituted a policy of stopping that. And Joe Biden just ended that policy. So that free flow of technology is the spigots open again.
There's a fundamental difference, though, in philosophy between the two countries in terms of making stuff. In China, quality means it's manufactured good enough. It's good enough for the job.
Good enough is good enough.
Good enough is good enough. In Taiwan, they develop a level of excellence that's on par with what the United States is or used to be, and which you may typically find like in a Germany or a Western Europe. It's pretty astonishing. Even things like casting aluminum, just how precision the molds are and how there's no flash on them. I mean, just how beautiful
steel
parts actually look. Steel.
Steel is a great example.
They do a beautiful job in Taiwan. And that's just one example of many, but there's just been a tremendous amount of tools in particular I've seen in the last few years, come out of Taiwan that have been a single source or a primary source of manufacturing.
Well,
very different than China.
Manufacturing is everything when it gets right down to it. What was it? That was something Donald Trump said. If you don't have steel, you don't have a country.
That's right. But it's interesting though. If we go back to the Taiwan Semiconductor example for a minute, we're seeing them now, and I think it's us pushing hard for them to move a lot of that capability, onto the mainland of the United States, and it almost winds up putting these companies in exile, right, into the United States should Taiwan ever be attacked, because the core capability would also be here.
Yeah.
And look what it also does. If you're building something that's 1,100 acres,
you're building to stay.
You're building to stay, and B, a factory that big employs a whole lot of Americans.
It's tremendous.
Yeah.
So there we go. Pretty interesting world we live in. Do you think do you think there is really the anger, or do you think it's just huffing and puffing around?
Yeah, show.
Well, I'd just like to propose that if I was Xi Jinping, heaven forbid, and I was looking at this situation...
You're far more handsome, Jonty.
Well, thank you very much. I don't look constipated, I guess. Except perhaps when I am.
Chinese
visa. Depends how much tangerine I've had. At any rate, one of the strategies that would be kind of blatantly obvious would be to cuddle up to Taiwan, be absolutely sweet to them, and say, gosh, we love you guys. We really want to do more business. Let's create opportunities. Don't worry about the invasion thing. Come on, we're not going to do that. And you know what? We would like to offer you guys the opportunity to, at some future date, maybe now when you're ready, to have a referendum, a democratic referendum, where you can decide on your own time to join mainland China.
It's fascinating you bring that up, because that was the policy, it appeared to me, in China before Xi took power. That there was a tremendous amount of business that was occurring between the two countries. That there was a lot of integration that was organically occurring at a cultural and at a business level.
That's how Apple's
Amy talked about all the commerce that went on.
Yes.
And
I also kind of wonder if
Amy,
the U.S.
that's another interesting thing. Amy Howe talked about how there are so many CCP-friendly people in Taiwan that they could probably win the election. And if Xi Jinping was just not quite so constipated, perhaps he could talk China. That's why I can't figure out the bellicosity.
Well, I think...
Why don't you just smile?
Well, what Billy brought up earlier around Hong Kong, I think, was, the bitter pill that people who are sensitive to the CCP in Taiwan realize, oh, wait a minute. This isn't all the sugar and spice.
This might not work out so well if we look at the other example.
Yeah.
And
right. Well, I wonder how much is political and domestically political. Is Xi putting on a show of military force in order to consolidate his power and then also gain support, distract the population from their various ills? Is that the strategy?
Well, I think you're
could be all of the above.
I do too, and also, but the military there is a tremendous political component of the government, and that you have to placate the military.
There
the PLA.
it is, and that's one of Xi Jinping's jobs.
Got to keep them happy.
He's the commissar,
and they're
of
very
the
aggressive. They have ambitions which are been tempered back by the politicians.
Well, there's an old guard, correct me if I'm wrong, who served in Korea, who possibly even served in the original revolution, and they've got a visceral hatred of the West. They've seen their brothers in arms
Deng
fall.
Xiaoping was that way, and he didn't have that visceral hatred of the West. He opened the world up to the West and took all of our money.
The only
seemed to be pretty smart, if you ask me.
The only time I met a Chinese general, and I wish I knew what his rank was, but when I was in Chengda province in 1998, touring a Buddhist temple with no Buddhists. I was going down these stairs. My father and I, big happy smile on my face. I'd kind of grown a beard because I was on vacation, and smiled at this military guy coming up the stairs, and he had as many badges as you can fit on a uniform. And he curled up his face in the most bizarre way and just glared at me. And as I walked past him, I realized, this guy actually really hates me.
Well, the good news is in China, they just named somebody to be in charge of religious affairs, didn't they? So
there you go.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. There's no religion.
Yeah, that's
how can you be
ironic.
in charge of religious affairs?
As long as
there is a state
poster next
there
to
is
the
a
cross.
state-authored religion.
Yeah.
So Xi Jinping gets to choose who the Catholic bishops are.
Does a religious affair in China mean the same thing it does here?
Good point. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there it was. Another edition of China Watch Radio. Today we looked at the bellicosity of our very, very brief meeting between our representatives, our defense ministers. 30 minutes they spent together.
At the end of 40 hours of flying.
At the end of 40 hours of flying.
Boy, if that
and
didn't
they looked at each other and they said,
see ya.
See ya. And they turned their backs, and that was 30 minutes. And so is that the situation? Is that the state we are in with respect to China? Where is that going to take us? Well, we'll find out next week on China Watch Radio. Right here. Join us.
This is KSCO Santa Cruz. Flight 1080 is on the way. Stick around. It's almost 4 o'clock.